what it is, but a lot of times we have these great ideas to talk about really serious topics, and then it's like, "Oh shit, we're talking about a serious topic."
I have to agree with you. This one was funny because I knew it was coming up, and then I listened to an episode of Move with Heart podcast, and it was about knowing your triggers and how you respond to them because that's really the only thing you can control is your response, right? I
Mhm.
mean, things are
That's
going to
true.
trigger you. You can't take that. You're the I don't know. You're the therapist here, but like you can't stop the triggers from happening. All you can do is change your response or your behavior in response.
No, that's 100% true, and that's something that, it takes a lot of self-awareness, observation, reflection, just so much to understand the different layers of something that can be triggering. And how it's triggering, I think, is also important, whether it causes some type of like physical, visceral type of reaction, whether it provokes a really strong emotional reaction, where you just go over the top or it causes you to kind of like shut down. It's not just something happens and you get upset, because then I don't think we're doing justice to ourselves and what we're feeling at that time. And then we're also likely not communicating to the world, whoever it may be, what is going on within ourselves. And so
Mhm, mhm.
it's a lot.
The shitstorm of feelings that you're probably feeling if you've been triggered. That word has been used
Hmm.
so much, almost like overplayed, and, you'll hear people say, "Well, I was just really triggered," and maybe you were, but that's also kinda letting go of your accountability for your response, and I'll put myself in that bucket, right? Like, we could all be better at owning our own responses and our own behavior. You're like, "But I
Hmm.
was just responding." Yes, and that is true, but what can also be true is, like, your response could have been better. And you can refine
100%.
that, and I think that's where, you can just acknowledge, like, that we're all always trying to get better at our responses. Why do you I was just having this real philosophical thought, like, why do you think we're thinking about things like this now? Do you think it's our age of, like, midlife, of, like, okay, acknowledging, like, "Yes, this triggers me," but, like, why do you think we're paying more attention to it as midlifers?
You know, several, I think, yeah. I think first is that just as a society in general, we're talking much more about emotional, mental health type issues. Um, I mean, from a clinical standpoint, and so just to take it into that realm just for like a moment, um, the actual diagnosis of PTSD, which is typically aligned more with triggers than how we just use it as common language right now, wasn't even in the DSM until like the late 1970s. Okay. Even though emotion like PTSD as we know it and kind of describe it today has happened since humans have been alive. I mean, that is something that is just an innate part of a human condition whenever you are put through a certain set of circumstances. And so I think through the last several decades, really, we, and maybe even thanks to some social media, have been talking so much more about emotional, mental health, wellness in general. And when that starts to happen, terms that are generally just used within a clinical context become a part of the general culture. And so I get real sensitive, I guess, sometimes whenever those words are used in that kind of context, because I think that at times it takes away from the severity of something that happened. I mean, me getting pissed off at a situation does not equate to a soldier who's coming home, you know what I mean, from Afghanistan or Iraq or some other type of conflict. You know what I mean? Those two things are not the same, but they can both be upsetting within each person's sphere of existing. And so I just get a little squirrely about those things at times, but I do think knowing what our emotional traps are might be a better word,
Yeah.
for
Ooh, I
me
like
to
that.
use. Like,
I like that actually a
because
lot, like knowing your traps.
yeah. Well, and traps sneak
emotional
up
trap.
on you, just like a trigger does too, but I just don't again, I'm trying to move away from using clinical terms, even though I'm not even practicing clinically, this doesn't even matter,
But it
at least in
what's
that world.
interesting is, like, you can set your own trap. Like, it's not
Mhm.
necessarily even a trap that someone else sets for you. You can be, like, building your own trap and get yourself in to these sort of triggered, like, situations, right? Or, like, traps where you
Yes.
have these big emotional responses. And so
Mhm.
just, you know, I think the first part, obviously, like anything, it's the awareness of, like, "Oh, when this happens, I respond in this way." And then you can
Yeah.
kind of like just acknowledge like, "Oh, this seems to become a pattern for me," or is a
Mhm.
pattern of things. When this happens, I respond in this way, or this has this impact on me, right? And it could
Yeah.
be a whole host of things. But
Mhm.
then you can start to go from there and dig deeper. Okay, why is that upsetting me or whatever impact it's having on you? And then you can go down the route of like, okay, how am I going to mitigate this response that I'm having
Yeah.
when something like this happens?
It does kinda take that willingness after the fact to step back and really do almost like a three-part analysis. It's like,
Mm,
okay, we know the behavior or we know the thing that just happened. But what were some of the precursors to it? You know?
mhm.
But that goes for you, for the situation, the individual, if it counts to somebody else. Like, what were the other factors that made this ripened? Um, for a trap to just to kind of be set. And that can be silly stuff, or not even silly stuff, but just things we don't think about, like not sleeping well. We call it hangry for a reason, you know, a whole host of different things. I get really bitchy and when I'm thirsty, not even whenever I'm hungry.
I'm dehydrated. Give
Okay,
me some
tons
salt
of things, right?
packets, people.
I know.
Um,
Right.
I agree with you. I also just think, perimenopause, like we're constantly in a bad mood, or
Mhm.
at least I am. Like every 5 fucking seconds, I feel like my mood has changed. And so part of it, I think, is also too, I feel more triggered or trapped. I have more opportunities to practice my response to things because everything pisses me off, quite honestly. Um, or like it could if I let it, just because
Yeah.
of it just is. There are some days are better than others, but, yeah, when going back to that question of, like, why do you think we notice it more? I'm like, is it because we just have more opportunities to notice it? Do you know any of your triggers right offhand that you can think of?
Well, I've been thinking about him a lot lately, and A, because we've kind of talked about it, but B, I feel like it's important. You know, we always talk
Mhm.
about self-development, all this kind of stuff on here. And so what am I actually doing that's part of walking that walk? And for me, and this is just my personal traps. I have I start to boil. Like maybe it starts off as a slow boil and then it just starts to kind of increase from there.
1,000.
Whenever I
Yeah.
feel like there is avoidance or procrastination of something that's important, that I feel is important.
Mm.
Like, if it is talking about, like, I don't know, even tiny things like a trip in the future, or it could be about what we're going to um, do about this type of behavior. What are we going to do when this happens? Like if I feel like there is something important that I need to talk about it,
Yeah.
especially with those who it involves or who are close to me, and I feel like that they're not engaged or that it keeps getting put off or that the action that I'm requesting, there's an element of procrastination in it. Jenny's laughing because she knows like exactly where I have a very, very, very difficult time with that because I am a person that will, if I am feeling something, it does cause discomfort. And so my initial response is not to run away from that. You know, it is to confront it and to talk about it and to problem solve it and to kind of like work it out. Like, what's the plan? What are we going to do? And when those steps don't happen and it just kind of gets pushed, that does not work. And so my response at those times is by the time it gets discussed, I'm already past the point of having a discussion and it turns into a conflict. most of
Yeah.
the time. I would say that
Yeah.
that's a big thing.
Well, we're very much alike in that way, in that we let things fester. I do feel like I've gotten better at it, at just saying what it is in the moment. But it's hard. It's hard to be the one to bring up uncomfortable things. It's hard to be the one that to say, this bothers me, or I wish you did this differently, or that hurt my feelings. Like, as easy as those roll off the tongue right now when you're actually trying to say that to someone who you need to hear you, it's really hard. And so we do tend to sweep it under the rug and just let it sort of fester. And then it kind of like comes out over something seemingly small that has been building
Mhm.
for quite some time. So you and I are definitely alike in that. I think that's kind of a self trap in some ways that we set. There is something to just saying it, right? And like letting it land and seeing how it lands, because as a people pleaser, it is really hard to do that. Um, and so, yeah, just that, like that practice of like building that muscle of just saying it in the moment, letting it land, and then like you can always repair. But I still feel like that's better than the overall like build up explosion that I am definitely guilty of.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and again, my buildup, I'll say what I'm thinking in that moment. That's not hard. Is it always appropriate?
Right.
No. Um, but my problem is if we're not then taking the step to working towards problem solving or to coming up with a plan, that's where my trap comes into play.
The
Like
non
I'm
response. Yeah.
yeah, I'm much more of like let's go. Like let's come up with an action
Hmm.
plan and then also let's follow through with the action plan.
Yeah, I think when I think about triggers or traps for me, it always boils down to the same thing. And it's just like not being enough, right? And I think it's like the age old thing that everybody worries about. And I think that's at the end of the day, what we're all so like striving to do is to like prove our worth, whether we choose to acknowledge that or not. But anytime I feel like my worth has been, uh, what's the word? I don't know the right word, but anytime it brings that feeling of like worthlessness or just like that I don't
Mhm.
matter or I'm not enough, not good enough, like that is always going to send me into a spiral. So,
Mhm.
again, lots of practice. I feel like, in the last 6 months, but that's a good thing too, is to practice because you can't make that go away. Like unfortunately, that's part of the human experience is to feel like you're not good enough or that, I think that's just part of it because everybody feels that way at some point in life, in some
Mhm.
aspect of life. And,
Yeah.
that's not going away, but what I can change is how I respond to that feeling and how much, real estate I kind of let it eat up between my ears.
Mhm.
That's
Mhm. Yeah.
the
And that's where the
daily
work comes into play.
the daily work. That's right. That's the work we do. That's the meditation. That's you know, whatever you want to call them, grounding techniques, all the things that I do to try to like keep myself regulated these days. Um,
Mhm.
that's where the work comes in. It's all in like your response and like, yeah, it's gonna happen. And 9 times out of
Mhm.
10, if you probably knew the other side of the story, and I say this to myself, saying this to myself as I say this out loud. If you knew the other side of the story, it's probably not what you think it is. That's one of those things. Perception is so personal and everybody's got a different perception of the situation. A lot of times it's so vastly different than what we make up in our head for the other person,
Sure.
right?
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
and so all these times that you
Mhm.
feel less than because of something they did or said, that was certainly probably 95% of the time wasn't a person's intention. Um,
Mhm.
but we don't always know that, and we tend to let that affect us or some of us probably more than other people let it affect us. So can't
Mhm.
avoid them, but we can do the work to soften the edges and how we
Right.
respond.
Which is
And if
fair.
that
And
ain't
then to
some hippie
again
love shit,
oh, right. Sounds like fun.
kumbaya, my love.
Right. Taking it back to church.
Uh,
There we go.
Anywho,
Like we said, no one's perfect. You're still gonna fall, but is it a bear trap or is it a mouse trap? You know, one's
Right, and
really gonna
that's where
do
you
some
your
damage.
response comes in, right? And that's the main gist of, like, you can't stop things. You're not gonna change other people's behavior, but you can change your own. So you can change your
Mhm.
response. Then it comes into choosing, like, well, one of my responses could be, I don't have to be around this person. You can, okay, figure out, okay, how am I gonna work around this so that when this happens and I feel this way, how am I gonna respond? Um,
Yeah.
I even like, yeah, sometimes I think it's good to practice in your head, like, this is how I'm going to, this is what I'm going to do. When I feel
Mhm.
this way, I'm going to go to find some solitude, take some deep breaths, you
Mhm.
know, let that shit roll off my back or whatever it is. And just realize that, like, it's not that important.
I used to do this all the time clinically. It was like a visualization exercise, and visualization has been used by athletes in the military for years. I mean, that's what
Yeah.
a gymnast and divers are the best examples. Like they'll stand at that back corner or at the board, and you see them. They'll go. What they are actually doing whenever they take that deep breath and pause is that they are visually seeing themselves, their own body, their own movements, do whatever series that they are getting ready to do. So that way it creates another level of rehearsal mechanically that they're able to kind of cope with. And so we would used to tell people imagine this situation in three different ways and imagine it to the absolute best way that you can, where the other person's responses, facial features,
Mm-hmm.
tone of voice, the setting, the smells, the sounds, all the things that can be a part of
Mm-hmm.
that situation. Imagine it going best case scenario, worst case scenario, and most likely. And that takes
Mm-hmm.
maybe a long time to do that. But sometimes by taking the time to do that, you can then be prepared for
For
whatever
your
scenario
response.
is going to, yeah, kind of
Yeah.
come up at that point. And hell, maybe your worst case scenario comes off of what happened last week, you know?
Right.
And still, that's okay because now you can use that as a base in order
Right.
to kind of, again, build off of that. Like, and I think that
Right.
that's important too. Like, yes, some shit may have went totally south. Now let's use that as an example so that way we can see, okay, well, that kind of sucked and don't want to go back to that, but what's the next less thing that's going to suck? And it may
Yeah.
not be all the way over there, the rose petals, you know what I mean? But what's the next step down from hell, or out of hell? Um, you know, that might be the place. So,
Lord have mercy. I like that. I like that analogy. Uh, yeah, I think we've covered it, right? As with most things, just goes back like preparing yourself for these situations, right? That's why we do the work. That's why we say it over and over again. That's why we do the work so that when these things arise, you're more prepared in the moment to have the best possible response. So, physically,
yeah.
mentally, emotionally, all the things. We cover all the topics here on the Lilas podcast. All right. I think that'll wrap us up. Until next week, Lilas.
Yeah.